Rain begins to fall softly on the windshield. The traffic is at a standstill. One driver sits gripping the steering wheel, his jaw clenched, face flushed with frustration. He pounds the horn. Time is ticking. He's late. A few feet away, another driver sits in the same line. Same delay. Same weather. But this one leans back, the windows fog slightly, and a quiet tune hums from the stereo. He breathes deeply, calmly. He's still late, but he is not angry. What's the difference? It's not the storm. It's not the traffic. It's not the events. It's the mind. In a world that constantly bombards us with information, pressures, opinions, and noise, we often feel as though life is something happening to us. Social media scrolls endlessly. News headlines provoke fear or outrage. Conversations escalate. We live in a storm of events, many of which we cannot control. But Stoic philosophy offers a counterpoint, that peace does not depend on the storm ending. It depends on how we respond to the storm. As Epictetus wrote, "It's not things that upset us, but our judgments about them." This truth lies at the heart of our exploration today. Modern life leads us to believe that happiness is found when things go right, when we have the perfect job, smooth relationships, and good luck. But Stoicism tells a different story, one in which true freedom begins not from changing the world around us, but from changing how we interpret it. This video invites you into that mindset, not to avoid hardship or pretend everything is fine, but to uncover how much of your experience is shaped not by what happens, but by what you believe about what happens. Let's begin with the foundations of Stoicism itself. Originating in ancient Greece and later flourishing in Rome, Stoicism was never meant to be an abstract system of thought. It was designed to be lived. Stoic practice divides the world into two categories: what we can control and what we cannot. The weather, other people's opinions, outcomes, and fate fall outside our control. Our actions, thoughts, values, and choices, these are ours to shape. From this simple framework, an entire way of living was born, centered not on avoiding discomfort, but on strengthening the inner life. To the Stoics, suffering is not the problem, misjudgment is. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, famously wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the obstacle isn't merely something to overcome, it becomes the training ground for the mind. When something difficult arises, the Stoic asks not, "Why me?" but "What can I do with this?" The event is neutral, the mind assigns meaning. That assignment, more than the event itself, determines whether we grow or suffer. Imagine someone receives criticism at work. One person sees it as a personal attack, a wound to the ego, and spirals into anger or despair. Another sees it as useful feedback, an invitation to grow, and calmly reflects on what can be improved. The criticism is the same, but the experience of it differs entirely. This is the Stoic insight in practice. The event is not the experience. The mind creates the experience, and in doing so, it creates suffering or strength. In our age of comfort and hyperstimulation, this may feel like a foreign concept. We're taught to chase convenience, to avoid pain, to seek pleasure in every moment, but the consequence is fragility. The more we try to shape the world to suit our moods, the less we prepare the mind to stand tall when the world inevitably changes. As Seneca wrote, "He is most powerful who has power over himself." The power we seek isn't in controlling others or external outcomes. It's in mastering our judgments, in becoming the architect of our own inner state. We are constantly interpreting. A missed message becomes rejection. A bad day becomes a sign of failure. A challenge becomes a catastrophe. But what if we paused before rushing to meaning? What if we learned to notice that moment just before we react and ask, is this judgment true? Is this useful? Is this mine? Or have I inherited it from fear, habit, or the voices of others? The Stoics call this practice prohairesis, the ability to choose our mental attitude. And it is, they say, the one thing no one can ever take away. The stories we tell ourselves shape the world we see. A person who believes the world is out to get them will find confirmation everywhere. A person who sees life as a teacher will find lessons even in loss. This is why Epictetus insisted that freedom begins in the mind. Men are not disturbed by events, he taught, but by their opinion about events, and if that's true, then perhaps peace is something to find. Perhaps peace is something we practice moment by moment, thought by thought, judgment by judgment. There is a quiet power in remembering this. That while you may not choose every moment life offers, you do choose how you meet it. You may not stop the rain, but you decide whether you curse the sky or dance in the storm. You may not avoid the noise of the world, but you can create silence within. The Stoic mind is not cold or detached, it is awake, aware of what belongs to it and what does not, and in that awareness, it finds room to breathe, to choose, to respond rather than react. So ask yourself this: what if you didn't need the world to change for you to be well? What if you learned to change the lens through which you see the world instead? The Stoics are not promising that life will be easy, but they are promising that the mind, when disciplined, can remain calm amid chaos. As Marcus Aurelius observed, the universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. In the next chapter of this exploration, we'll walk through the lives of those who embodied these principles not in theory, but in hardship. Because it is one thing to read ancient wisdom in a quiet room. It is another to see how these ideas were forged in prisons, in palaces, in war, and in illness. Epictetus, bound in chains. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by crisis. Seneca, betrayed by politics. They remind us that Stoicism was never just about thinking clearly, it was about living wisely. And that wisdom, as we'll soon see, begins where control ends and the mind begins. In the 3rd century BCE, the bustling streets of Athens were no stranger to chaos. Greece had suffered wars, political upheavals, and shifting alliances. Amid the noise, a man named Zeno of Citium walked into a bookstore. There, he read the works of Socrates and felt something shift within him. Not in the world around him, but in his perception. That moment would eventually lead him to found the school of Stoicism, a philosophy rooted not in changing events, but in mastering one's judgments. Zeno understood that life would not become easier, but perhaps the mind could become stronger. Zeno's students gathered in the Stoa, the painted porch, a public place in the Agora. They did not hide away from the world, but studied philosophy in the very center of it. Stoicism was never escapist. It was forged in the marketplace, amidst trade, gossip, disputes, and unpredictability. Zeno taught that the wise person seeks not to control the winds of fate, but to adjust the sails of judgment. The Stoic does not flee from life. He learns how to live rightly within it. And he learns to begin with his mind. One of the most remarkable voices of Stoicism arose centuries later, not from the upper class, but from bondage. Epictetus was born into slavery in the Roman Empire. His leg was permanently damaged, and he lived his early life without freedom. Yet his teachings would become a testament to inner sovereignty. Men are disturbed not by events, he taught, but by their opinions about events. Epictetus could not choose his master, but he could choose his response. In doing so, he discovered the only true freedom, the freedom of one's mind. Imagine being chained, powerless in body, but calm in spirit. That is the paradox of Epictetus. He taught his students to question every reaction. When insulted, they were to ask, "Is this within my control? If not, why suffer twice, once from the insult, and once from the judgment of it?" He urged them to write down their values daily, to prepare their minds like soldiers ready for battle. In every loss, he saw an opportunity for clarity. In every obstacle, a place to practice. Then there is Marcus Aurelius, an emperor who ruled the Roman world, yet wrestled daily with his own thoughts. He did not seek applause. His diary, known today as Meditations, was never meant to be published. It was a private reckoning, written by candlelight during plague, war, and betrayal. In one entry, he wrote, You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. These words, written by a man with armies at his command, still ring true for us today, who often feel powerless in our own homes. Despite being emperor, Marcus lived modestly. He often slept on hard floors, ate plain food, and kept a list of reminders to be patient, to observe, to ask himself, what part of this belongs to me? What part belongs to fate? He endured the deaths of children, military mutinies, and constant disease. Yet his writings remain calm, even tender. He teaches not through conquest, but through self-command. For him, the battlefield was always internal, and victory meant equanimity, not dominance. And then we have Seneca, a wealthy Roman senator and philosopher. At first glance, he seems the least likely Stoic, entangled in politics, immersed in luxury. But Seneca's greatness lies not in a flawless life, but in reflection amidst contradiction. He wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." He warned against worrying over future losses, urging instead to live each day as if it were borrowed. His letters to Lucilius are filled with quiet wisdom on how to handle anger, face death, and find peace through simplicity. Seneca believed that philosophy was a form of preparation, that one should rehearse loss mentally before it came. Let us prepare our minds as if we did come to the very end of life. He wrote, "Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day." To him, it wasn't about being untouched by life's storms, but about training the soul to remain unshaken. Even as he was condemned to death by Emperor Nero, Seneca met his fate with calm resolve, proving that ideas practiced in peace can withstand the weight of chaos. What united these three figures, Epictetus, Marcus, Seneca, was not their status, but their commitment to inner clarity. Whether bound, crowned, or compromised, each returned to the same principle, that our mind is our domain, that events are neutral, that it is our judgment that makes them painful or bearable, unjust or insignificant, tragic or transformational. They did not agree on everything, but they agreed on this: between stimulus and response lies the greatest human power choice. None of these thinkers denied emotion. They did not advocate for numbness. Rather, they urged understanding. Emotions, they taught, arise from beliefs. Change the belief, and the emotion shifts. Fear emerges not from the dark, but from what we think the dark contains. Anger arises not from insult, but from the belief that we must not be insulted. They asked, what happens if we question those beliefs? What happens if we trace suffering not to the world, but to the stories we tell about the world? The Stoics also warned of false attachments, to reputation, to wealth, to health. Not because these things are bad, but because they are not guaranteed. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that all things pass, that one's legacy would fade, that even Rome would vanish. But he saw in this a reason not to despair, but to stay grounded in what endures: virtue, reason, and presence. Do not waste what remains of your life. He wrote, in speculating about others, it is your mind alone that matters. These teachings are not buried relics. They are seeds still blooming today in psychology, in philosophy, in the quiet moments when we pause before reacting. In the next part of this journey, we'll explore how modern minds overwhelmed by deadlines, heartbreak, and digital noise can still apply these ancient tools. Tools that ask not for perfection, but for perception. Tools that do not offer escape but strength, because though centuries have passed, the storm outside still rages. But perhaps now, with their help, we can meet it differently. The modern world does not hurl spears or erupt in plague as ancient Rome once did. Yet it attacks the mind in subtler ways. We wake to headlines designed to provoke fear. We scroll through social media feeds, measuring our lives against curated fragments of others. We face silent battles in boardrooms, classrooms, bedrooms often unseen, but deeply felt. And in these battles, it is not the event itself that breaks us, it's how our mind interprets it. The Stoics may not have predicted smartphones, but they understood the timeless conflict between what happens and what we make of it. At work, the pressure to perform can feel relentless. A deadline looms, a manager criticizes, a colleague ignores your effort. In these moments, the default response is emotional, frustration, self-doubt, resentment. But the Stoic invites us to pause. Ask yourself, is this in my control? You cannot change the deadline or the opinion of others, but you can control your preparation, your patience, your response. Epictetus might say, you are not hurt by the task, but by the story you attached it, perhaps the belief that failure defines your worth. What if that story is optional? Many modern Stoics begin their mornings with journaling, a practice borrowed directly from Marcus Aurelius. He would write, "Today, I shall meet people who are busy, ungrateful, arrogant, but none of them can harm me unless I allow it." Writing in the morning becomes a quiet armor. It does not shield you from events, but it sharpens awareness. It lets you remember, what is outside of you is not yours. What is within your character, your integrity, your choices is entirely up to you. Even 5 minutes of this reflection can change how you move through the day. In relationships, the Stoic insight becomes even more profound. Because here, the emotional stakes are high. We want to be loved, understood, appreciated, but people are unpredictable. They disappoint us, they leave, they say things that hurt. Here again, Stoicism suggests not detachment, but conscious love. Through negative visualization, a Stoic might imagine the absence of a loved one, not to become cold, but to grow more grateful in the present. Instead of clinging, we cherish. Instead of expecting, we attend. Because we remember, the person is not ours to control, only our intention is. When relationships end, or trust is broken, pain follows. But what transforms pain into suffering is the judgment layered over it. This shouldn't have happened. I'll never be whole again. I was wronged. Seneca taught that misfortune has no objective weight. It is our judgment that makes it heavy. What would it mean to feel grief but not collapse into it? To acknowledge hurt but not become defined by it. The Stoic path is not about suppressing emotion, but about moving through it with clarity. A wound may open, but the mind can choose not to pour salt into it. Personal identity crises also plague the modern age. Many feel lost in their 20s, adrift in midlife, or uncertain in old age. Jobs change, roles shift, external markers, titles, followers, possessions can vanish overnight. The Stoic question returns like a compass: what remains under my control? Even in confusion, you can shape your response. You can slow down, breathe, reflect. Write down what you value, not what society expects, but what your soul whispers. Are you living according to those values, or chasing shadows? Stoicism calls us home to ourselves, not as static beings, but as architects of meaning. One of the most accessible tools in modern Stoicism is called the view from above. It is a meditative technique that invites you to mentally rise above your current situation. Imagine looking down on your life from the roof of your home, then your city, then your country, then the earth itself. From that height, many problems shrink. What was a humiliation becomes a lesson. What was unbearable becomes survivable. Marcus Aurelius used this often. He reminded himself that in the vastness of time, even emperors are specks of dust. Yet in that humility, we find peace. Another powerful technique is the dichotomy of control. On paper, draw 2 columns. On one side, write what is within your power, your words, your routines, your mindset. On the other, write what is beyond your grasp, others' opinions, world events, random chance. This simple practice helps us let go. When we mentally release what was never ours to begin with, we conserve energy. We suffer less, we act more freely. The Stoics were not passive. They acted, but only in the direction of their influence. They did not chase the wind, they adjusted their sails. Modern psychology, especially cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT), has taken deep inspiration from Stoic thought. Aaron Beck, one of CBT's pioneers, cited Epictetus directly. CBT works by identifying distorted thoughts and reframing them precisely what Stoics practiced. Is this thought true? What evidence do I have? Is there another way to see this? Such questions reveal that suffering is often optional. By changing our interpretation, we change our emotional world. It is not magic, it is mental discipline, and like any training, it becomes stronger with use. This Stoic approach finds echoes far beyond the Greco-Roman world. In Buddhism, suffering is rooted in attachment, just as Stoics caution against clinging to outcomes. In Vedanic Hinduism, the true self is said to be unshaken by external change, untouched by the world's fluctuations. In all these traditions, one insight rises again and again: you are not what happens to you. You are the awareness that observes it, and if you cultivate that awareness, you do not become indifferent, you become grounded. In a world flooded with stimuli, it is easy to forget this. Easy to be reactive, easy to get lost in what others post, say, expect. But the Stoic invites you to return, not to the past, not to some ideal future, but to this breath, this moment, this mind. In traffic, at work, in heartbreak, in confusion, the power to respond wisely never leaves you. It only waits until you remember it is yours, until you remember that the mind, not the event, is where peace or pain is born. What if peace isn't something to be found in the world, but something you remember in yourself? Imagine for a moment that the world will never stop moving. News will never stop spinning. People will never behave exactly how you want. Storms will come, financial, emotional, relational. If so, where do you build your refuge? The Stoics believed the answer was simple, yet profound: not in the outer world, but in your judgments. Not in rearranging the waves, but in steadying your inner oar. They asked not how to change events, but how to master one's mind in the face of them. We begin again with the question: what if the world is not against you, not with you, not even for you? What if the world just is and you are the one writing meaning onto it? One person hears criticism and feels destroyed. Another hears the same words and feels challenged, even grateful. Epictetus reminds us, it's not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. This is not just philosophy. It's architecture, the blueprint of a calm life, the inner structure of a resilient soul. Revisiting what we've explored so far, we started with a story. A man in traffic, angry and red-faced. Another, calm and centered. The rain falls equally, the cars are the same. But their experience was not. The only difference was what happened inside their minds. From this, we trace the roots of Stoicism: Zeno, Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and how they each, in their own time of suffering, found freedom not in events, but in how they chose to see them. We then looked at today. In a world of overstimulation, outrage, and endless comparison, it's easy to mistake the storm outside for the storm within. But it's not the news, not your inbox, not even the people around you that cause distress. It's the belief that these things control you. The Stoic invitation is not to deny hardship, but to transform how you interpret and respond to it. When the event becomes the teacher, and the mind becomes the student, wisdom arises. And so now we arrive here at the quietest part of our journey, the reflection. No longer seeking more data or history, but returning inward to ask, what does all this mean for my life? When you wake up and the world feels uncertain, what do you reach for? When someone betrays you, what story do you tell? When your plans fall apart, do you fall apart too? Or do you remember what you control, your attention, your actions, your integrity? Seneca once said, "A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not." This isn't passivity, it's power, the power to anchor yourself in what truly matters. You might lose your job, you might be misunderstood, you might age, get sick, say goodbye. These are not punishments, they are life. And life, when seen through the Stoic lens, is never a tragedy but an opportunity to practice inner excellence. This isn't a cold detachment, quite the opposite. The Stoics weren't emotionless, they were emotionally trained. They grieved, but didn't crumble. They loved, but didn't cling. They lived, but weren't afraid to die. When you train your mind, you don't become indifferent, you become deeper, more grounded, more free. You cry when it's time to cry, but you know that pain is a visitor, not your identity. The storm passes, you remain. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna teaches, be steadfast in yoga, O Arjuna. Perform your duty, and abandon all attachment to success or failure. The lesson echoes across time and cultures. Do what is right. Let go of the rest. In Hindu Vedanta, as in Stoicism, the self is the still awareness behind all experience. The clouds come and go, but the sky remains untouched. In this way, we begin to see how universal this truth is. You are not the event. You are how you respond to the event. Let's pause for a moment. Wherever you are, perhaps sitting in a quiet room, or walking through a busy street, bring your attention back to yourself. What are you resisting? What are you trying to control that is not yours to command? And what have you forgotten is yours to shape? Your thoughts, your presence, your choices. Begin there. Begin small, one breath, one pause before reacting, one moment of gratitude before complaining. This is the Stoic path, not perfection, but presence. A life well lived is not a life without obstacles. It is a life where obstacles become instruments of growth. Marcus Aurelius, in the final years of his life, faced loss, betrayal, illness, and war. Yet in those very trials, he wrote his meditations not to impress others, but to remind himself of his deepest truths. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. He was not immune to life's pain, but he was immune to despair. And now, we close this meditation with an image. Imagine yourself walking through a quiet garden. The wind brushes the trees, the world moves, but your steps are steady. You are not controlling the weather, not the paths others take, but you are choosing your own stride. You are choosing stillness, moment by moment. And in that choice, you rediscover power not over others, not over fate, but over the one thing that truly belongs to you, your mind. So the next time life surprises you, as it surely will, pause. Ask, is this under my control? And if it is, act with courage. If it is not, accept it with grace. Let your mind be your kingdom. Let your response be your offering. Let your life be your message. The world will continue spinning. Let it. You are not built to spin with it. You were built to stand, to breathe, to think clearly, and to respond with wisdom. Epictetus reminds us again, softly this time, no one can harm you unless you allow them to disturb your mind. Let that be your shield. Let that be your compass. For in a world full of noise and motion, your calm mind is your most powerful sanctuary. And perhaps, just perhaps, this is the freedom you've been seeking all along, not the freedom from events, but the freedom within them. Very little is needed to make a good life, only the choice to make it, moment by moment. Thank you for walking this journey with us. See you in the next meditation.